Hey guys, it's Mr. Lowry. I was gonna say good to see you, but I can't see you right now. You can't see me, but I'm here. Woo! Hope you guys are doing well out there. We are just nearing the end of the semester. We only got 2 more weeks, this week and next week, and then after that it's finals. So we probably got maybe 5 assignments left, something like that. And then we're going to take our final. So hang in there. You guys are doing good. If you're a little bit behind, get in touch with me. Let's talk and let's figure out a plan for you. I'd love to be able to help you. If you're all caught up, great job. Keep up the good work. Hang in there. So we're in chapter 12. We're in chapter 12, which is all about triangles. And just to kind of start out, we want to get some language to be able to talk about triangles. So this is on page 588 of your book. This is going to be an important thing for you to know. It's pretty easy. You just got to know these terms. Now, we already classified acute angles, obtuse angles, right angles. So this should be pretty easy. But we can classify triangles by their angles or by their sides. Let's start with the angles since that's kind of familiar. So remember that an acute angle is less than 90 degrees. So an acute triangle has 3 angles that are all less than 90 degrees. Today we're going to talk about how to add up all the angles of a triangle, or what happens when you add up all the angles of a triangle. You get 180 degrees, but we're going to prove that. But these can all be less than 90 and still add up to 180 degrees. Okay, a right triangle is just a triangle that has one right angle. It actually can't have more than one because the angles, like I just mentioned, the sum of the angles of a triangle, they add up to 180 degrees, which we're going to prove again, like I said. So if one's 90, then the other one, there's not another one that can be 90. These both have to be acute. So if a triangle has one right angle, it's a right triangle, called a right triangle. Okay, an obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle, right? It can't have more than one obtuse angle because then obtuse means bigger than 90, and if it has 2 angles that are bigger than 90, then the angles won't add up to 180, which they need to. So obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle. And then an equiangular triangle has 3 congruent angles. So if this is the case, they're all acute, but they all have to be the same as well. Okay, they're actually all 60 degrees. All right, now up here we have triangle classification. Excuse me. Triangle classifications by their sides. So if none of the sides of the triangle are congruent to each other, like this is not the same length as this, and this is not the same length as this, we call that scalene. None of the sides are the same. Isosceles triangle is when 2 of the sides are the same, but the third one's not. So make sure you can see those markings here. There's a little bit of a glare, but there's a tick mark here, and there's a tick mark here showing that those are congruent. Again, the same thing here. This is a little hard to see, but you got 2 red tick marks, 2 red tick marks, 2 red tick marks. So an equilateral triangle is all 3 sides are congruent. So we can combine these terms and these terms to describe triangles, and that is what you're going to do in your assignment. So your assignment for today is this guy, 12.1 to 12.2. We're going to talk about triangle angles, and we're also going to talk about what congruent figures mean and things like that. But the first little section here just has these 7 triangles, and you're just going to describe them, okay? But you're going to describe them in 2 ways. You need a term that describes its angles and a term that describes its sides, okay? So let's start out with angles. Now this one, notice it has a right angle, okay? So if it has a right angle, this is going to be a right triangle. Remember, acute would have to have 3 less than 90 degree angles, but this is 90. Obtuse would have to have one that's bigger than 90, and it doesn't have that. So this is a right triangle, but also we can classify it by its sides, right? And since it has 2 sides that are congruent, again, this one and this one are marked congruent in that figure, and this one is marked congruent to this one, we can call it an isosceles triangle. So we're going to call this a right isosceles triangle. Okay, you could also call it isosceles right triangle if you want to. It doesn't really matter. But that's kind of how you're going to go about these. So determine, which one of these it is, and then determine which one of these it is, and then you use 2 terms to be able to describe both shapes. Okay, let's do one more. Let's look at this guy right here. Okay, so this angle, notice that that's bigger than 90 degrees, right? Now these ones are acute, so less than 90 degrees. But if we have one angle that's bigger than 90 degrees, that would have to be obtuse, right? So this is obtuse. That's kind of how the angles are looking there. Now let's look at the sides. Again, there's two congruent angles there, or excuse me, two congruent sides, but the third one's not congruent. So this would be an obtuse isosceles triangle. Okay? So that's what you're going to do with these. You got to go down and you got to figure out which things apply, which terms apply. And you're going to have two terms, right? So you can have like a acute scalene, or you could have a right scalene, or you can have an obtuse scalene, or something like that. You can't have an equiangular scalene, because if it's equiangular, it'll also be equilateral. You can have an acute isosceles. You can have a right isosceles. You can have an obtuse isosceles, that kind of thing. And then you can have an equilateral, which is also equiangular. So there's a few different combinations. There's like 6 different combinations of these, and then you have these guys out here too. So you're going to look at the markings. Remember, the tick marks indicate which sides are congruent. The little arcs indicate which angles are congruent. You also have markings that indicate when you have right angles. Okay, things like that. If you don't see any markings, then you can't assume that things are congruent, and so you can kind of figure out kind of from there. All right, so that's the first page. Not too bad. One other thing that we want to talk about when we're talking about angles is when we're talking about the angles of a triangle, most of the time we're talking about what we call interior angles, like this angle, and this angle, right? So real quick, here's another just some key terms in your book. This is on page 589. You'll see that there's interior angles and exterior angles. So most of the time we're talking about these guys. The 3 inside angles of the triangle. Okay, and that's kind of the angles that we use to describe the triangles. We also have something called exterior angles, which happens when the side of a triangle, when we like extend it, it makes an angle with the other sides of the triangle, and so we have these like outside or exterior angles. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but when we're classifying triangles, we're typically looking at the interior.